Okay, afternoon guys, we'll get started. Hello, my name is Alex, Dr. Alex Hope, and I'm currently a senior lecturer in business ethics over in the business school. But previous to that, I used to be a lecturer in project management, teaching you guys 3 years ago. And the Sustainable Project Management course that you are studying at the moment was a course that I developed here 2011-2012. So if you like the course, then it's because I developed it. It's fantastic. If you think it's really awful, it's obviously Robert's delivery, something to do with him, it's not me. But yeah, Robert invited me along. He said, come along, speak to you guys, speak to the students, deliver one of the sessions, which I hope I can remember, because it's been a few years, and maybe talk to you a little bit about sustainable project management and maybe what the future is, and how this is the most important course that you will ever do in your entire professional project management career. Okay, but we'll get started on this particular lecture then, which is about monitoring, evaluation and assessment of projects. Okay. And for me, this is one of the most important elements of project management, and one of the ones that gets forgotten about the most. Okay, assessing and evaluating what it is you're supposed to be doing in the first place. A lot of project managers don't do that. We get so used to going on to the new projects and finishing, closing the next one. We forget to take the learning with us. We forget to check that we've actually achieved what we should achieve. However, with sustainability, that is really important, that we actually do make sure we've achieved what we're supposed to achieve, because it's all about people, it's about improving lives, it's about changing the world. And how can we do that if we haven't checked that? So we're going to do a little bit about sustainability monitoring. So how do you monitor the sustainability aspects of your project? A bit about evaluation. So how do you make sure you've done what you said you would at the end of the project? A bit about assessment. We'll talk about how to develop some indicators to check your progress. And then a little bit about sustainability reporting at the end of the day. Okay. So if you've been following the course, you'll have seen this slide a couple of times, I guess. This is from the PMI, the PMBOK, the best practice, and it's what they recommend where you put your efforts for successful outcomes. So you've done a bit of planning, you've got the execution of the project, the closing initiation, and this bit here, the monitoring and controlling of your projects, they suggest it's worth about 50% of your effort and your time. So relatively important. So starting off with monitoring, and you have to, there's a slide I'm going to give later on which will tell you the difference between monitoring, assessment and evaluation, because they are different and it's key to kind of understand that. But monitoring really is about keeping track of your implementation. So you've set your project out, you've spent all this time developing these really complex Gantt charts and all the rest of it. It's about ensuring that you are in the right place at the right time, with the right people, achieving the right outcomes. It involves understanding the progress of the project against the goals and deliverables. So these goals and deliverables that you started off with in your project implementation, are you actually still achieving them? Are they actually still deliverable? Because projects change over time. Are we still where we're supposed to be? There is the periodic checking of progress of work against targets. And again, in many projects you will have various stages which you formally have to assess. So if you work on a public sector project, for instance, I used to work quite a lot in local government, big local government projects. You will have what we call gateway reviews, where you have to write a report at certain points during the project to say to the funders, you are where you're supposed to be. Monitoring. So specifically from a sustainability point of view, it's slightly different perhaps than some other deliverables that you might have. So sustainability monitoring and development, they are core to your sustainability strategy. And they should start at all points, okay? They should start at the implementation stage. All of the things that you're setting out, what are you looking to do? You can start monitoring from day one, okay? Not halfway through the project, from day one. And it's important to understand that not all dimensions of sustainability will be revealed at the initial stage. Some things come on stream later. So a good example of this, for instance, is the London Olympics 2012. This is one of the big kind of, what's the way I put it? One of the best examples of what we call a sustainable project. All the way through that project it was kind of talked about in terms of what they were doing in terms of reducing energy or increasing social inclusion and all of these kind of sustainability things. However, one of the big important things from the Olympics, and one of the reasons the Olympics is so important, is they have what we call a legacy phase. Okay? So every Olympics that has been in the last kind of 20, 30 years has been done in order to try to improve some social outcome. So in terms of the London Olympics, they were regenerating part of London, East London, which was very, very poor, very, very socially excluded, very, very dirty in terms of its environmental impact, and the Olympics was there to improve that. However, that dimension wasn't revealed until, recently, 2 or 3 years after the Olympics finished, because there's no way you can check to see whether or not the sustainable legacy in terms of providing new housing for new people was going to actually come to fruition until after the project had finished. Okay? So some things do not reveal themselves until later on. So you have to monitor all the way through and even after the project. And it's also important to monitor at regular intervals. So making sure you've set those into your project plan. Okay. So there's a big bit of text here, but sustainability monitoring is expected to commence right at the start of the project. All these dimensions don't come on stage until a bit later on. So the economic and environmental dimension of sustainability can come at a more mature stage after 6 months of it. But attention to other issues such as the institutional, logistics, community will help detecting any deviations from your specific plan. So quite often in projects, sustainability projects at least, all the funders and the board are interested in is how much money are we saving. Okay, so if you're reducing carbon emissions, how much is that saving us? If you're reducing energy, how much is that going to save us? However, a lot of these things come on stage a little bit later. And there are various steps that we have in monitoring, and you'll find these in the project management body of knowledge and various other kind of bodies of knowledge. And the first thing is to identify the different units involved in planning and implementation. So who is required to help you with the monitoring? What has your team got in front of them? Have you got a finance, part of it is finance, part of it logistics, part of it human resources? Identify which items need feedback in your plan. Develop your reporting medium. So one of the things as a project manager that's really difficult is communication. And you've probably talked about that at some point. How are you going to get these reports in? So if you're a project manager and you're managing 100 people across a large, a large infrastructure project, how are they going to report back to you whether or not they're being successful? How is that monitoring going to happen? Is it going to be computer-based? Is it going to be paper-based? Do they phone you once a week? Do you have meetings? How do you do that? You then need to determine the periodicity of reporting. Is it going to be monthly, yearly, weekly, bi-monthly, whatever that might be? You have to set that into the plan. Very important, who is responsible for reporting at different levels? Again, so is it going to be specific staff that you have there? Do you have a load of staff who are interested in the finance side? Do you have the kind of architects if it's a construction project? Who is going to report and when? Who's going to process and analyse these reports? Again, do you have someone in your team to do that for you, to do it yourself? And then identifying the critical and unreliable implementation areas and feedback. So the key thing about monitoring is you're always monitoring the monitoring itself. So you're getting these reports going back as to how your project is going on, whether or not you're on target, whether or not you're achieving what you're supposed to achieve. But you need to go back and look at the monitoring and say, well, could we have done that better? Could we have come up with a better communication system? So you have to monitor the monitoring, which is quite strange to think about. Okay, next we have sustainability evaluation. Does anybody understand what the difference between monitoring and evaluation is, just out of interest? Anybody want to say what evaluation might be? Monitoring is during, evaluation is after.
Oh, after.
Not quite, after. So evaluation is very much about going back and seeing, did we actually achieve what we set out to achieve in the first place? And again, project managers, they're probably better at monitoring than evaluation actually, because it's still live, you want the project. Evaluation is afterwards, and it's always key. You kind of finish your project, you've succeeded, you've achieved what you want to achieve, you finish your product or your building or whatever it is, and then you're on to the next job like that. So it's all exciting and it's brand new. And people forget to go back and say, well, hang on, did we do everything okay last time? And I used to work in public sector management, as I said, in local authorities, and it was really, really heartbreaking to see the same mistakes made over and over and over again, because no one gone back and said, well, that didn't work, let's fix it. They would just make the same mistakes. So I would say evaluation is probably more important than monitoring in some cases. So some of the definitions you would find if you looked at a dictionary or something is, it's about finding the value of something. And project management is always about value. It's about improving or creating value, not just financial value, but it's about creating value somewhere. And it's an assessment as to whether our project activities conform with our standards. So that's key. If you're doing project management, you've got to achieve certain standards. You've got to achieve the PMI, PMBOK standards, APM standards, etc., etc. So it's a study and review of your past operating experience. So evaluating a project results in helpful in providing answers such as what progress has been made, did we actually achieve what we were going to do, did we achieve our desired outcomes, if not, why did we not achieve those, if we failed on something, why, and project failure is quite common. If you look at the literature, there's lots of literature about project failure. However, there's not much literature about lessons learned from project failure. We just kind of write about, oh, these awful projects that have failed. We don't write about the lessons learned from that. Do the project results justify the project inputs? Could we have done the same thing for less? Could we have been more strategic? Could we have done it cheaper? Could we have done it with less resources? And are there ways that the project activities can be refined to achieve a better outcome? So again, what could we do better? And again, working in construction for a while, as I did, we would have lots of projects that hadn't been evaluated. The architects would design another building that was pretty much the same as the building before, and they were making the same mistakes. And a good example is we had some doors similar to this in a particular housing development that we built, and there was a problem with these doors, and they opened the wrong way round. Okay, that makes sense. They opened this way, and the wall was too close to it, and people couldn't get in the door properly. It was for elderly people who were slightly less mobile than we are, and so they were really having trouble opening these doors this particular way. And we got the designs back for the next building that we designed in this kind of phase, and the doors were the same way around. And we said to the architect, well, why did you do that? He said, well, that's what we did last time. I said, well, have you been in and spoke to the occupants? They were like, well, no, we haven't. We'd done an occupant evaluation. We went and we spoke to the people and said, what are your issues? And they told us. We had a big long list. We handed that over to the architect and then he had it fixed. Said all these things were wrong with your building. However, when we built the next building, it was much better. We had a lot less complaints. But the only way we did that was by monitoring the outcome, by going back into this building, and architects generally don't do that, and making sure that it has achieved what it was supposed to achieve. So evaluation is very important. Yeah.
When you say that we should learn and take benefit, should we then on the next one, for example, right across the board, acknowledge our faults and our learnings,
Absolutely.
so everybody can see it?
Absolutely. You should build into your project plan the evaluation stage post project, if you like, and then you should build in prior to the new project a kind of time to sit down and evaluate what you've done on the last project in the way to build it. Yeah.
They can see that we're looking at changes here, which you might not be before.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say yes. And however, my experience again in working in a lot of it working in construction was that people don't like to look at the problems that they've created. So architects especially are very, very risk averse. They don't want to go back and see what was wrong with their lovely building that they built, even if it wasn't their fault. However, how can you improve if you don't look at your faults, if you like? And people like the Royal Institute of British Architects have actually recognised this. One of the big problems we had with carbon emissions, for instance, from construction buildings, was that we could design buildings to be very, very sustainable in terms of energy use. We just can't build them to the way that they're designed. We have a lot of trouble, especially in the UK, because we've got guys standing in holes in the middle of winter putting bricks on top of each other, and they don't build them as they were designed. However, trying to go back to architects and saying, well, what is the difference between the amount of carbon you said your building would provide and what it does provide now you've built, it, it's almost impossible. So Reba had to come up with an anonymous forum which you can go to on the internet to work out where their faults are. But it's anonymous, so you don't know who the actual architect is or who the client is. You can work it out if you're clever. However, yeah, people do not like to share their faults. However, yeah, it's part of life, isn't it? Everybody makes mistakes. We need to go back and evaluate them. There are lots of different ways of doing that. We need to first work out what we're evaluating. What does success look like? And you've probably done a little bit on project success at some point, success factors. Okay, you can't evaluate whether you're successful unless you define what success looks like. Okay, which is, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but you know, success doesn't mean the same thing to every client, if you like. Specifically, what information do you have? What can you show? How successful you've been? You've got to be realistic. What resources do you have for evaluation? So again, a key reason why we don't evaluate a lot of our projects is we don't build it in at the project initiation phase. We don't cost it. Okay? We kind of cost up to the final handover of the project if it's for a client, and then we walk away. So you have to actually cost that evaluation and plan it in there as well. And sometimes programs do a self-evaluation. Sometimes we'll have an evaluator come from outside. Okay, so you'll actually employ somebody to come and evaluate your program for you. And I do a bit of work on this sometimes as a consultant. So for public sector, so they'll say, "Can you come and have a look and tell us whether our project was successful or not?" It's really scary because they sit there and they look at you and they're like this, "Was it successful?" Generally, they are to some degree, not always. So yeah, project evaluation. Evaluation tools, there's lots of tools out there. They can be very simple. You can have a simple checklist. A checklist is an evaluation tool. You know, when you guys are doing your assessments, yeah, do you evaluate your assessments after you finish them? Okay, you read the comments from what we're saying, oh, you should have done this, should have done that. But do you sit down and actually evaluate that and say, okay, well, this is what I need to learn for the next essay I'll write, for the next project I'll do? Because writing an assignment is a project, okay? It's got a defined start, defined end, it's got a defined outcome. So you can do it that way. Also, when you do your assessment, you should always look at the marking schemes, because that's how you're marked. You can evaluate yourself against your marking scheme before you actually submit your assessment. So you can say, well, based on the marking scheme, I reckon, yeah, I've done all this, I should get first. Okay? And if you don't, well, you know, you can speak to your tutors. Feedback forms, another way we do that. That's how we evaluate our quality of teaching here. So at the end of every module, you'll get, well, we're just changing it now apparently, you'll get an online link where you'll go and you'll evaluate your tutors and the course. Okay, and that comes back to us, and it says whether or not you are happy or satisfied or not, or what you can do better. And then we have to write a report on that saying, yes, either you were satisfied, great, or you weren't satisfied, and this is what we're going to do to make the next running of this module better. Okay, so always give quality feedback to your module tutors. I can say that now because I'm not your module tutor. Statistical reports. So again, there's these big, on a big project, you'll have lots and lots of project information coming in, and you'll have databases which help you monitor that. And then there's bespoke tools which are created especially just for a single project, which are often used. So to give you some examples of the kind of tools that are used for assessment, well, first off, we'll just get this out of the way. The difference between assessment and evaluation, as you said very well. Assessment is ongoing all the way through, or evaluation is at the end. Assessment is generally process orientated. Are we actually going through the right steps to achieve the outcomes we're supposed to achieve? Whereas evaluation is, well, did the project or service actually, was it a good thing to do? And again, assessments are diagnostic, so you can identify areas for improvement, and you should be able to improve your project and tweak it as you're going through it to make it work. Whereas the evaluation is much more judgmental, this overall result at the end of it. Yeah, so some of the things tools you can use. So this is EcoCompass. It was developed by Fundación Entorno of Spain, and it's available on the WBSCD website. This is the World Business Community for Sustainable Development. So this is a group of businesses that get together to come up with new services and products and ways of helping to improve sustainability in projects. And this is mostly used on product design. So you use it to go back and say, look at, I don't know, look at an iPhone once it's been created, look at the phone once a project has been done, and work out the intensity of the raw material you used in terms of weight, in terms of carbon emissions, in terms of the amount of water that was used, energy consumption to make that particular product, generation of emissions, efficiency of the product, etc., etc. And the idea is you will kind of come out with an assessment of how sustainable the iPhone was, if you like, and you will go back, and the next time you design the next iPhone, you will try to improve on that particular set of metrics, if you like. So eCompass is used quite a lot in that sphere. If you're working in construction, there's lots of these tools out there. BREEAM, which is a way of assessing the sustainability of large buildings like the universities. I worked for a while as a BREEAM assessor, so my job would be to look at university plans and make sure they were sustainable in terms of water or energy, etc., etc. Green Stars is a Dutch version of it, Co-Sustainable Homes, which our lovely government has now just got rid of. LEED, which is an American version. CASB is a Japanese version. So you have these standards of evaluating sustainability within construction projects. You have these bespoke tools, and this is one that I worked on for my PhD, actually, a few years ago, which was a tool to assess sustainability of multi-residential elderly people's homes. Okay, so basically, old people's homes. And we were building 26 of them, and we wanted to make sure that they were built to be sustainable in terms of reducing energy and being better heated and all these kind of things that old people need. And there wasn't any tools out there at the time that kind of helped us to evaluate that, so we built one, which looked at energy and socioeconomic data, health and well-being, materials, and it was a way of putting through various different construction developers' plans to come out with an answer as to how sustainable we thought they might be, and then give them feedback on that. So these bespoke tools exist. Other tools we've got, Earned Value Management is a tool that's used a lot in project management at the moment. It helps project managers to measure project performance, and it kind of tells you in terms of effort versus cost whether or not your project is successful. And there's a lot of stuff going on there now about what we call sustainability earned value management. So trying to use these tools, which were originally used in terms to make financial judgments, to make sustainability judgments. So as the amount of resource we put in to reduce carbon emissions, for instance, is it being successful? Was it a good thing to do? Challenges for monitoring, evaluation and assessment. First off is getting the commitment to do it is a huge challenge. So again, as I was saying, a lot of people don't like to evaluate their projects at the end of it. So you have to build it into your project plan at the very start, and then people can't get out of it. So when you come back and say, we need to evaluate this project, say, well, we don't want to, say, well, actually it's part of that project, we won't be successful if we don't do that. Establishing baselines is really difficult in the beginning of the project. So if you're designing the iPhone, for instance, knowing what a good iPhone looks like, or a good mobile phone looks like in terms of energy use, okay? Once you can find that, so how much carbon goes into producing this product, you can set targets to try to improve on that, and you can monitor against it. Identifying realistic indicators is very difficult. We're going to look at that in a minute. Finding the time to do it and sticking to it, as I said, putting it into your plan. Getting feedback from your stakeholders, okay? So going back to the people who are actually using your product or your service that you've created this project for, and asking them whether or not it works. That's a really difficult thing to do. And then reporting back to them. People often forget that part of monitoring is actually reporting back to the people that you're supposed to, whether it be your project or your stakeholders. So there are some challenges there. Okay, so a key part of monitoring and evaluation is indicators. So indicators tell you whether or not you're achieving something. So very simply, it's an instrument which gives you information. So an indicator will be your speedometer, your odometer on a car, tells you how fast you're going, gives you feedback. And the idea is that we measure what we value and we value what we measure. If you don't measure something, you can't tell whether or not you're achieving it or whether or not you can't improve on it. So we have to measure absolutely everything. So there are a couple of ways of doing this. First off, we have direct indicators, and these are really, really simple. So these refer directly to the subject they've been developed for. They can directly pinpoint the subject of interest, which is often the case of operations. And a very easy way to do this is things like reduction of amount of greenhouse gas emissions. You can measure that. Okay, reduction in energy use. You can measure that. Just using your what are they called in your house, where you read the energy off. Your meters, yeah, God, yeah. Your energy meters, you can measure that. The amount of water used on a project, you can measure that. You can measure these things very easily and directly. Reduction in travel distance. So if you're on a project which needs a lot of flying or a lot of driving around, you can measure that. So it's very easy to do. And you can get like a scorecard that comes back and says, well, this is how much energy we use this month. Okay, and you can set targets to your project managers and say, well, actually, we need to reduce that by 10%. And you can create these indicators easily. Indirect indicators are a bit more proxy indicators. So this is a way of measuring something that you can't directly measure. Okay, so your subject and interest cannot be measured directly. And these are things like qualitative subjects, such as behavioural change or living conditions or good governance. So all these woody things that are important, but they're hard to measure. So again, to give you an example on the projects I was working on, we were trying to improve people's health and well-being. How do you prove you've improved someone's health and well-being? So we had to come up with a set of indirect indicators to do that. So in one respect, we work with elderly people. We know that they need to have a certain temperature in a particular building to improve their health or to keep them at the optimum health. So we would measure temperature and say that if the temperatures are correct for this amount of time, we know that we've made an improvement to their health and well-being. Things like daylight. We know that daylight is very important for human health and well-being. So the more daylight we have in a particular building, we can therefore say to some degree we're improving health and well-being. So they're a little bit woolly, but they're a way of trying to kind of measure something that can't be measured directly. Yeah, that's what I said. Oh yeah, another thing on the project I was working on, we were trying to increase what we call social sustainability. We were trying to improve the local area where people worked, and such things such as the Olympics would do that. And so one of the ways we said we were going to improve the local economy. Well, how do you measure that again? So one of the things we said, we'd measure the percentage of workers on this particular project which came from the local area. Okay, and we could define that as much as we wanted, within 10 miles of the project, 20 miles, 30 miles. And we would say, well, by keeping people who work within the area, therefore we are contributing to the economy of the area where we're working. And the same for things like bringing money into the area, so again, using local materials and local contractors. So again, working in construction, quite often in the northeast, you'd have a contractor who was based in the southeast of England. And so all of the money that was going into the project or would go to them and would go into the southeast of England's local economy. Whereas we might have, a comparable contractor in the northeast. Okay, maybe in the old days, you'd give it to the one who was cheapest. Maybe that would be the one in the southeast. But in today's new world, we would give it to the one that creates the most value generally. So the guy in the northeast might be more expensive. However, they're keeping that spending within the local economy. Therefore, we could say, well, in terms of social inclusion, social economy, local economy, we're creating value. So therefore, we're creating more value than we would if we used a cheaper guy. It's hard to do that, but that's the kind of thing we're moving to nowadays. Cost is no longer. Again, there's lots and lots of stuff written on sustainability indicators in the literature. You can't read all of this. And they came up by different contractors. Sustainability is a consultancy, the Global Reporting Initiative again, Environmental Sustainability Index, things like how do we measure ethics and values and principles, materials used, biodiversity, land, energy intensity. There's lots of indicators out there. So if you're working on a project and you need to develop an indicator for a specific thing, it's probably all out there. And you guys now are very good at academic research. You can go out there and find those indicators and use them. So the tool we created for the local authority, if I go back a second to tell you about, here it is here, part of it. All we did for this particular tool was go out there, look at all the literature, look at all the best practices from the PMI or from different standards out there, and pull all the best ones together and create a bespoke tool. A very relatively simple thing to do. So with this particular project, we were doing things like measuring carbon emissions. We were trying to develop a building that minimised carbon emissions, and we could do that using, at the time, we could work out what our emission rates were in terms of what the architect designed the building to be, and then we could work out an improvement on that. So you would design a building, you would say, well, this is going to emit this much carbon. We say, great, how much are you now going to reduce that by to create a sustainable building? And we could measure that percentage. And the developer that had the best percentage would get a higher score. What else is there? Yeah, space heating we could develop, building fabric, we came up with some metrics which you could measure. So these were very direct measurements, they're easy to do. The science out there tells us what a better bit of material is than one, and we could then assess them on that. So developing indicators is key. And there's lots and lots and lots of indicators out there, and they could be large, they could be global. The United Nations uses indicators as part of the climate change agreement. Next one's coming up in Paris next week, by the way, to kind of monitor where we are as countries, where we are as nations in trying to improve things like poverty and alleviation, and trying to reduce carbon emissions, trying to promote good governance. So indicators are out there for pretty much everything. Global indicators. Indicators, some key things that you need to think about if you're developing them. They've got to be relevant and meaningful, so they've got to measure what they're supposed to measure. They've got to help inform decision making, so they've got to actually be able to go to someone and say, well, this is what we need you to do, we need to reduce more carbon emissions, and this is how we do it. They've got to recognise diversity of the business, they've got to support benchmarking, they've got to be defined, measurable, transparent and verifiable, smart targets if you like. They've got to be understandable to stakeholders. One of the things that I really hate is when you see these, we've run this project and we've reduced carbon emissions by 50%. What does that actually mean? What does that actually mean? What was it to start with? What does 50% actually mean? 50% of what? Which is quite often when you see like public dissemination of things like this, they'll say we've actually saved enough carbon to take 50,000 cars off the road. So we're trying to make it relevant so people can kind of think, 50,000 cars, wow, that's quite a lot, isn't it? So people can kind of think about, it means something to them, it's relevant. We need to focus on the direct management control, and you need to recognise upstream and downstream aspects of your activities. Okay, where are we going next? Okay, sustainability reporting. So once you've done this project and you've been very good, you've evaluated it, you've monitored it, and you know that you're achieving what you've got to achieve, you've evaluated it, you said, yes, we achieved our outcomes, we're fantastic, most sustainable project in the world ever. You need to report that, and sustainability reporting is something that's getting really, really, really much more attention nowadays. Transparency about sustainability organisational activities is leading and driving this sustainability reporting kind of world that we're in now. So you can go online and you can download the reports of pretty much any FTSE 500 company, and they will all have a sustainability report of some kind for the organisation, for the company. Because all companies now want to show how green they are, how sustainable they are. And we live in this world where everybody's interested in that, okay? You know, all the stuff that's been going on with Volkswagen at the moment, if you read their sustainability reports, wow, it's amazing. However, their ethics reports are probably not quite so good. But yeah, so we need to communicate this. And projects, the way I see projects are, they're the business of doing business. So pretty much every organisation achieves its goals by a range of projects. And we've started to see organisations reporting on projects as well as corporate goals, okay? So it's something that's becoming more and more interesting to project managers as well as kind of operational management. So sustainability reporting is the practice of measuring and disclosing all of the kind of achievements to all stakeholders. Can be internally, so you need to tell your team and your company what's going on, and they can also be external to all stakeholders such as us as well. So sustainability reporting is a broad term which is used to describe reporting on economic, environmental and social impacts, the triple bottom line if you like. And it should give us this kind of understanding of how sustainable a particular project is. So there's corporate sustainability report for HSBC in general. And then we've got a report here which is the mining company on their copper mining. And it's a report on a specific project that particular company ran. And so I said we're seeing much more sustainability reporting on projects as well as companies. And there are lots of methodologies and ways out there of doing this, and this is probably the most famous one, the Global Reporting Initiative. And it sets out, if you are reporting on sustainability, these are the criteria that you should use. Are you still doing the same assessment for this? No, it's different. Okay, well, I won't talk about that. So this is one of the tools that you can use to improve sustainability within your project or an organisation. It's a framework which has been developed by a wide range of stakeholders, academic stakeholders, industry stakeholders, all the rest of them. And it basically tells project managers and operational managers how to report and what to report on. So it's very useful if someone says to you, we need to report on this project. You think, how the hell am I going to do that? The Global Reporting Initiative, I learned that. And you can go and download their freely available standards and report on it that way. But there are some key principles you need for sustainability reporting. They need to be significant to the organisation, so you need to be able to talk to your organisation. They need to understand It needs to be in their language to some degree, but also it should be significant to your stakeholders. And I teach a module called Corporate Reporting for Corporate Sustainability for Multinationals. And so the students there, they look at loads of these FTSE 500 reports next to each other. Some of them, you'll read these reports from these big companies, and they're written in so much company jargon, you don't understand a word that they say. That's not sustainability reporting. What sustainability reporting is, any of you guys should be able to pick up any report from any company and understand what their impacts are on you as an individual or society as such. They should be written in English or plain English, if you like. Or plain any language, to be fair, just not company jargonese. So, sustainability reports based on the framework are supposed to kind of talk about relevant laws, norms and codes, performance standards. So in terms of how you are doing to your commitment on this or that, how you work within local laws. And they should report significant issues of significance to both the organisation and your stakeholders in general and the general public. Okay, so your indicators should be across a wide range of people. And one of the things that we're seeing more and more of now is a move away from what we call sustainability reporting. So again, if you look at these FTSE 500 firms, some of them will have financial reports, sustainability reports, operations reports, stakeholder reports. And we look at this new integrated reporting world where one report does everything. Okay? And the idea of that is most people look at the financial reports of a company. If you're a shareholder, be interested in how you're performing because you've got a share in that company. But not many people were looking at the sustainability reports unless they were interested in that particular thing. We're now seeing them come together, and some big companies like Puma and Adidas are the ones who started to spearhead this and said, well, actually, sustainability is as important as finance, so we'll just put them together, and so you can't read them separately because it's all kind of interlinked. So this demonstrates the links between your organisation, your governance, your financial reports, your sustainability reports, and reinforces the connections. So it's saying to people, sustainability is as important as the profit that we're making. And yeah, so far, most of the common organisation response to reporting on sustainability has been to publish a report, and now we're trying to bring them together as annual reports. Some of the key things that we found is you have to be transparent. So if you're making mistakes, you've got to say that. So we're talking about there. You've got to be transparent. We live in this what we call the goldfish bowl world now. Everybody's on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and social media. So if you lie or sweep something under the carpet in your report, you are going to get found out by somebody somewhere down the line and you'll be in trouble for it. So the best reports are transparent. Okay, we didn't achieve this. However, what we've learned from it is that next time we will do it this way. They need to be readable, so they need to be written in plain language. They need to be holistic, so not just looking at carbon or energy, we need to look at sustainability in all three spheres, social, economic and environmental. And they need to be robust. They need to have numbers, they need to have figures, they need to have evidence to prove what you say you've done is being done. And a lot of companies are starting to get in trouble. They're being found out for basically fiddling their reports or saying things that aren't strictly true. They used to be seen as marketing reports, lovely photos of the community and people so happy. But then people have got a bit upset about this and we're starting to see them a little bit more robust now. And the other important thing is, these reports are now starting to lead towards building relationships for funders and things like that. So if you've just finished a project and it was a big project, I don't know, building a dam for Chinese government or something nice like that. Next time you run a project, you're going to funders. Quite often funders will say, we want to see your sustainability report. And back in the day it was like, why do you want to do that? The reason is, funders only want to be involved in projects which are seen to be sustainable. Why would you fund a project which is not seen to contribute to society? The banks all got very badly stung in 2008 with the big financial crisis. So a lot of them now are trying to rebrand their ethics and say, we are ethical companies. We will only invest in projects which help the world. Okay? And so a lot of them now, these reports are used to go and get funding from banks and companies because they want to be seen to be sustainable themselves. So very important.
Can I ask you a question? So
Yeah.
Do you think society, as a general whole, there's a shift because with everything being more important to understand that now what's happening is everybody's realised the damage we've been doing, and if everybody starts to undo it, that's why even from the bottom up, that's why the transparency is more relevant now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we often say nowadays in this area, we live in the post-2008 world now. So 2008 is when we had the big global financial crisis, this big meltdown, and a lot of people started to wake up and say, well, actually, some of the things our organisations are doing are really, really bad. I mean, we've had that before, but it got brought into even more kind of sharper focus, I think, because a lot of people lost a lot of money. We've got all these austerity measures at the moment. We've got a lot of things going on in the world. And so a lot of companies have now realised that, actually, people are starting to look at us. And I think this has coincided with this kind of new move towards social media and things like that, whereas you cannot do something as an organisation without it being on Twitter within minutes, seconds, and blowing up and blowing up and blowing up. Next thing you know, there's a big campaign against this particular company. So organisations themselves are starting to see that it is coming from below in terms of being ethical. If you look at the fallout to the Volkswagen thing at the moment, okay, back in the day, that would have just been swept under the rug, if you like. But now there's people saying, hang on a minute, we bought a car from you, and it's not as efficient as we said it would be, therefore you owe us some money. And there's going to be some very big payouts coming from that particular thing. So companies are very now looking to kind of demonstrate that they are sustainable, and also they're trying to demonstrate that in a kind of transparent and robust way by showing, well, this is actually what we're doing now in terms of this is how we can prove it. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
So,
It's becoming more social.
it's becoming more of a thing, if you like. And if you work in project management and you're bidding for projects, and you do things like have to go through things like pre-qualification questionnaires, if you're bidding for a big project, you'll see now a lot of these projects will have sustainability outcomes all the way through. So they'll say, okay, have you got an environmental management tool on your particular company? Do you have a certification? Do you have this? Do you have that? If we spin it the other way around, and one of the things I haven't got time to talk to you about, but maybe you will in the seminar, is project management is now being seen as part of the solution to these problems. Okay? So how do we repair some of the things that we've gone on in the past? We run projects. Projects are a way of creating change. Okay, so projects are now being seen as a way to kind of maybe build a better world, or to kind of make things better. If you type sustainable project management into Google now, you'll find lots and lots and lots and lots of kind of jobs looking for sustainable project managers, which is why I said this is the most important thing that you will learn here. And you see lots and lots of research groups coming out. I'm involved in a global sustainable project management research group. We're just setting up now, first virtual meeting, because we're not going to fly anywhere, of course, on Skype in January. And that's a group of 20 academics and practitioners from all over the world that are getting together to say sustainable project management is the future, if you like. And the International Project Management Day, did you know that's a thing, by the way? There is an International Project Management Day. There's an International Day for everything. Was a couple of weeks ago, and their theme was sustainable project management. So this is the way the project management industry is going. And again, if you looked at the Robert will tell you, if you looked at the PMI, PMBOK, or APM, PMBOK 5 years ago, not a mention of sustainability. You look at it now, it's a whole chapter all the way through. So yeah, this is the kind of, from a project management point of view, from a global point of view, from a corporate point of view, this is the way that people are starting to move. And there's very few courses that do sustainable project management, so you guys are in a good place. You can talk about this when you go to get a job at the end of it. So just to sum up, we looked at monitoring, evaluation, assessment and indicators and sustainability reporting. There's lots of further reading for you here. Are there any questions about this or anything in general before I go about sustainable project management? Anything you need to know? Anything that's interesting? This is the future, guys, I can tell you that now. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Okay, thank you very much. And nice to speak to you.
Yes.
If you're interested in this kind of thing, you can follow me on Twitter. Dr. Sustainable, of course, is my Twitter name. And you can follow my blog, Dr. Sustainable, which talks about sustainable project management. So you get some tips for your thesis there.
I should add next week, Alex will be with us in the seminar. So in the hour